I'll challenge everybody just for 1 month. For example, you like fitness, unfollow every big fitness influencer that you follow that looks better than you. Just unfollow just for a month. After that, you can follow twice as much if you want. Just do it for 1 month. Or if you like fashion, remove all the pretty people.
Yeah.
If you like Quran, remove all those children or 5 years old who are like half fit machines. Just do that for 1 month and look how it changes your mental health, basically.
One that I've started recently since I've amped up my social media and YouTube and whatnot is post and run, right? I say this to myself because I know a few other content creators, Ryan Holiday and stuff like, and people like him. They have this philosophy of like post and chip, as in like don't stay on the platform, which sounds kind of a bit disingenuous that you're on this platform, but then you're not even using.
Okay, after realizing that you might have high standards that are too high and not realistic, and that a huge part of your success is just comes down to pure luck,
Mm,
Qadr, what should that do with you? It should create that empathy. So realizing that um, if there's a big, if chance plays a big role, um, have empathy for if somebody fails or is in a lower status than you.
The following is an interview with brother Maarten van Elst from Holland. He runs the website muslimfit.com. I think you'll benefit from this discussion. It was a wide ranging conversation, and it is the second installment of our conversation. We had an episode last year as well. We touch on meritocracy, the effect of luck in success or worldly success, how we should look at that from the Deen perspective to build empathy for other people. We also talk about social media, how it affects our expectations and how it magnifies exceptions, makes us compare ourselves with other people and potentially in a negative way. Brother Maarten gave us some practical tips on how to deal with that, how to use social media in the modern age. And I think if you're into the kind of deeper side of these topics, it's an episode that you'll definitely enjoy. And if you do, like, share, subscribe, and give us a rating on your podcast platform. That'll be much appreciated. Jazakumullah khairan and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is a second installment of a podcast with brother Maarten from Holland, and he's behind the website called muslimfit.com, I think. And we previously had an episode about a year ago that was more to do with the pandemic and how to build productive habits leading up to Ramadan and dealing with the changes that the pandemic kind of brought into our lives. So this is the next installment. Since then, we've exchanged more messages on different topics, and I just wanted to have a more informal conversation about a variety of topics with Brother Maarten. So Jazakallah khair for joining us, and we'll see where the conversation goes, inshallah.
Yeah, wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me back.
No problem. So there was a few topics that we've messaged back and forth on regarding on Instagram that I think we agree on, but they're kind of deeper. So perhaps I'll give you more time to kind of delve into some of them. So I wanted to start with this kind of not antagonism, but this pushback on the self-development kind of hype, right? Or the, I think you said discipline is overrated, right? Um, the lie of meritocracy. I wanted you to kind of talk on that as a general primer on the topic. I just wanted to kind of give it over to you for a bit, and then we'll find some discussion points from within that, inshallah.
Yeah, yeah. So a bit of a background of what I do,
Yeah.
because it entails, it has to do a lot with the subject. I'm a vitality coach, so I am in the coaching and self-development business. And before I went into coaching professionally, I was in the medical field. I was a nurse anesthetist. So when I wanted to make, and the reason I got into coaching was because I saw a lot of patients on my operation table that it wasn't necessary for them to be there. Just talking about prevention and the first world health crisis, like obesity and diabetes and that kind of stuff. So um, because I'm initially medically trained, I was really hammered on the use of evidence-based practice. So supporting my claims and tools that I use um, with empirical knowledge and findings and basically, is it true what I'm saying and claiming? So when I make the switch to the coaching world, yeah, it's a very different business because in the coaching scene, there's no like overarching body. It's not like psychology that you have to go to university. Everybody can call themselves a coach. So unfortunately, it brings with it a lot of basically false claims and stuff that doesn't only might not work, but be actually harmful instead of being best beneficial. And the downside of working evidence-based and using empirical knowledge and basically trying to show reality is that reality is often not as fancy and enjoyable, basically, as fairy tales. And I think a big part of the subject that we're going to discuss is meritocracy and how makeable is success and how much of success is down to your own work and your own vices and virtues. Is that most, I always call this the Tony Robbins effect, and even when Muslims use it, the Tony Robbins Islam, is basically you can create your own success. And the point you are, where you are at life and how successful you are purely down to your virtues. So how hard you worked, how smart you are, and the techniques that you used. But basically, the reality is much less easy as that, because we see that and you very quickly get into like a theological discussion. But before we do that, and I'm not really qualified to do that, so if we look at empirical knowledge, science, we see that success in a worldly sense is very heavily based on pure luck and coincidence, and much less on own effort. And that's and often when I say this, especially in the coaching scene, everybody is triggered.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, I've experienced the same.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, there's a part of me, I think you posted about this on Instagram once, and I commented that I definitely feel like there's truth to it. But then it all depends, like with a lot of things, on definitions and nuances, right? So, for example, when you said the Tony Robbins Islam, where everything is to do with the person's own kind of virtues and strengths and effort, right? The first kind of pushback question that I would have. The other thing is sometimes it's incentives as well. So say, for example, this isn't the case. So say if optimizemuslim.com was like a money-making coaching / kind of online course productivity business, right? Which I am kind of intending for it to go down that way. But what I'm trying to say is then my thinking on it would be influenced by things like the money that's coming in, right? The incentives, potentially, not kind of obviously, but subconsciously that might have an impact on my thinking. So maybe that's why there's that kind of pushback within that community. But aside from that, I was thinking, no one within the Tony Robbins Islam, do they actually say that it's completely yours? They still factor in that this is by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because otherwise then they're not even, so let's get that one out of the way. So they're still saying that this is by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you kind of make the effort. Is that your kind of point?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So and this is why I think, and what unfortunately a lot of Muslims who have some basic knowledge, or basically their knowledge of Qadr and Rizq and Qada, it's on point. There is no flaws in their thinking, and it's the same way what unfortunately I see that not a lot of scholars are talking about this, because, for example, I've talked to a few scholars, and when I started off with, for example, talking about the self-help industry, they all see the merit of it, because of course self-development and self-help can benefit you, and working hard and smart and efficiently is something which should strive for. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, yeah, if you have your aqidah firmly in your heart and in your mind, so
Yeah.
your belief, but also your rationale and the way of thinking is correct, it wouldn't be harmful. But what we see is, yeah, everybody says, yeah, of course, everything is from Allah, and we have Qadr, we have destiny, and those kinds of stuff. But there's a difference between if I'm asking you it, you know it, and what you're actually doing and subconsciously thinking, and how it plays out in reality. So, because basically what we see is just the fact of acknowledging that you can make a very good case empirically that most of your success is down to pure luck or Qadr, of course. So I'm talking luck because the theological discussion I'm not trained for. So most of my case is built up with empirical data. So let's work a bit, look at the data. There are a few empirical studies. For example, we look at how Americans perceive their economic mobility. So how easy it is for you to go from a low income class to a middle, and from middle to a high income class. Most recent studies have shown that, for example, the average American overestimates their ability to step up an economic ladder for 500%. And there are plenty of studies that show that there's a growing inequality economically, academically, in America, but also in other parts of the world. In the Western world, we're talking about. We're not talking about worlds that are countries that are very heavily corrupt and those kinds of stuff. So we can see it in observational research that the chances of an American or a Westerner to move up an economic ladder is getting smaller and smaller and smaller by the year, even when on paper our wealth increases. But we don't only have because those are observational and the correlation. You can all put all kind of questions and arguments why that's not true, and why it's all down to virtue because those people just don't work enough, and the average person is just lazy, those kind of stuff. So if we look at, for example, experimental science research, and I have two interesting ones. There are more, but these really make a good point.
Okay.
First, there was a study done on indie music, so pop music, but not well-known bands. And they made a chart algorithm that charted your that put you on a chart as a band, and it all came down about your rating. So if they paid a few people to rate bands, and they would look where you end up on the chart. But they didn't make one website; they made several. But all the websites worked with the same algorithm. So you would expect that the best band, if you believe in meritocracy, so that the best always wins, is that the best band with the best music and they who work the best, they will end up on top on every website because it's the same. It's the same algorithm, the same rules. But what did we see? That the ranking of bands per website changed a lot. And we saw at some websites a certain band was in the top, the best one, or at least in the top 5. Another second website, it was in the top bottom. So how is it possible that the same website with the same algorithm, with the same amount of people, and it was a pretty big cohort, so luck was put out of it. How is it possible that there is a difference? Because good music is good music, right? Well, what they saw with algorithms, and it works the same. I think everybody who owns a Facebook page, a business one, knows this, is that algorithms, for example, look at the rate of interaction. So, for example, if I put out a post on my Facebook and the first 30 people who watch it don't like it and don't interact with it, Facebook decides, okay, probably this post is not very interesting, so I'll not push it to the entire organically push it to all the readers. If, for example, the first 30 people who saw my post found it really interested and liked it, the website sees, oh, there's interaction with this post, Everybody likes it, the first 30. So this has to be interesting. And we saw the same on this website. If the first few people liked the song and gave it a good rating, you would end up on top. And that's what we see in all social media. And the fact if the first persons to watch your content, or in this case, the music, if they like it or not, it's pure coincidence. And we saw it because they had like 10 websites, and there was no correlation between the bands and the placing on the websites. So that's example, the first example. We also, for example, see another study. They had 4 groups, and in every group, they had to do some puzzles. And at random, they choose a leader. So there was no just the researchers chose, okay, you're the leader of this group. After the test, they gave the group a few cookies, but they gave one too many. So they have to give one, somebody got more cookies. And what we saw in every group that there was, the leader got the extra cookie. But it all came down because if we look at science, we see that if somebody is in power, they tend to see themselves as more valuable. And that's also the same reason why they reported why they gave themselves their own cookie, because they're the leader and they did more. And because the groups were large, also the luck is out of it. So we see, but these leaders were chosen at random and not because of their virtue. And those are two, one more personal and one a bit larger, with algorithms, that we see that pure luck decides a big part of your success. And the easiest, if I talk with clients, the easiest example is, I live in the Netherlands and we have a very good social economic square here. So good education, good healthcare. If you're out of a job, you get still get paid by the government. So it's a really social country. So just the fact that I've been born here makes me more successful and more privileged than somebody born in Africa. So what did you do to get born in my country? Nothing, pure luck. And you cannot ignore those huge benefits you get just by being born in a certain place. And let's all talk about privilege. So if we look at that, and there's so much science done on career advancement. For example, I think like 80% of all the CEOs are 6 foot plus, just because tall people are perceived as more authoritative and more smart and those kind of stuff. So those are all stuff that you cannot influence, and don't even influence. Your height doesn't make you a better leader or not. It's just a perceived physical stuff. So there are so many. You can really make a solid empirical case that the biggest part of your success isn't down to your performance. But what's really important, I'm not telling this for some social justice. Of course it is, but it doesn't have to make you deterministic, as in the sense that what you do doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But what this actually does is that believing in meritocracy has been shown to lessen sympathy for others and for yourself. Because if you are fully bought into the idea that I can be a self-made man, the American dream, and if I reach success and I believe I did it, I have less empathy to people who didn't achieve it. And at the same time, if I don't make my success, and the entire world and the entirety of Instagram is telling me that success is makeable, I have failed. So that is so basically it makes you egoistic, and it sets you up for failure if you because there's a second part to this discussion is currently in modernity, in all the media, social media, movies and stuff, the picture that's being played of an unrealistic part of success. So if you believe in unrealistic goals compared with meritocratic thinking, that everything comes down to your success or your own failure, you're basically setting yourself up for a very unhealthy path towards your life.
If I just, I think something that just came to mind when you were talking about the studies, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the studies, but something that just kind of hit me whilst I was listening to it. The first one is with something like music, obviously it's very social based, as in people think it hurts, don't they? So it's like if people will start buying something that they don't even like because everyone else is buying it. So then that kind of supports what you're saying, in that if the algorithm pushes something out, it increases the perception that this is something valuable and it's getting liked and getting views by more people. So then people naturally kind of start viewing it more, listening to it more, adopting it more. And then the second one about, I think it's about the balance. It's about to what extent people believe in this, because I don't think there's that many, there are extremes on all sides of every topic, right? So I think there are probably extremes. I think it's all just the person's own behavior and actions that have led to a certain outcome. But then on the other side, there's probably extremes that, you know, the whole determinism and free will argument. There's probably those that say nothing is up to the individual, right? But then it's about, with each person, the reason why it's a kind of a hard argument to make, especially in a short form content arena, is because it's hard to get the point across and address all the nuances. So say even the tall example, right, which I've heard something like that as well, that a lot of the CEOs, they're over 6 foot, and you said that it creates this perception that they're more competent than they are, right? Or that they're competent. But then there's potentially other factors. Maybe because of that, they've developed certain skills, like from an early age they might have become more confident and outgoing, or because of, again, it wasn't their kind of doing, but they develop certain skills as a result of that. And then there's other examples of that as well. So you can take it to good looks as well, how people who are more attractive always get more opportunities and everything else, right? So I don't think people have an issue with that. But then it comes down to, the next question would be, so how much control or how much of that individual input is there? Because on a personal level, right, self-help is something whereby, and maybe it comes down to mindset as well. You know, if someone has a growth mindset, fixed mindset, that whole Carol Dweck hugely popularized kind of topic, right, in the self-help kind of world. Some people, their whole thing is growth mindset, as in there's Tom Bilyeu, a famous one. He's had a few conversations recently where people have kind of started to say, the recent one with Jordan Peterson, where Jordan Peterson was saying how if there's a 2-year-old who's exposed to certain things and he develops this kind of behavior, and it's not treated or it's not rectified by the age of 4, then there's no kind of, once he's an adult, he's going to continue down that path. And that kind of, whilst I was listening to it, I was thinking that goes against the core of that Tom Bilyeu's kind of project, because his whole thing is your identity is self-manufactured, like you can change your thinking, change your life at any moment kind of thing. Okay, so then trying to bring all of that down to some question or point, is that oftentimes I'll hear something or read something, and I'll be able to implement it in my life, and it'll benefit me, alhamdulillah, by the will of Allah, right? So then that's where the whole self-help or that idea comes about, because if you see something or read something or implement something in your own life, you kind of think that there might at least be one person out there who's going to react a similar way. You're not saying everyone will, because people have all kinds of issues, traumas, limiting mindsets, all the rest of it. But then there's other certain examples that you get, and I'm sure you've got it in your coaching work, of tangible things that you suggest to people, they're able to implement, and they're able to. I've got an example of where I was talking to someone who was saying that he struggles to wake up for Fajr, right? And whilst I was speaking to him, I kind of got the sense that it wasn't just a off the cuff kind of excuse, like, oh, I just can't get up for it. It was kind of, I saw that the desire was there more than normal, right? So I suggested, I go to him, look, if you really want to, you can, because I thought he's the kind of guy that would appeal to this kind of thinking. If I felt like he was someone that's going to start crying if I said that, then obviously you have to be a bit more tactical and employ empathy, right? Yeah. So I said to him, look, if you really want to wake up for Fajr, you can. Look, there's so many things that you can do. Why don't you take it to the extreme? And then I said, you can download this application. It's an alarm clock application, and it'll only go off, because he was saying how he wakes up, switches it off automatically and goes back to sleep, right? Which I used to struggle with as well when I didn't know of all this when I was younger. So I go, there's this app that you can get, and it only goes off once you scan a barcode, right? So this application, the alarm will only go off once you scan a barcode. So I said, you can save the barcode something in a different room, and then you're going to have to walk about 10 meters or so. And by the time you get there and scan it, you're going to be off. So then at that time, if you go back to sleep, then it's on you because you're already kind of up. And after about a week, he was using it, and he said that it worked, right? So that's the point of saying that. Was there's the example of sometimes, when we see things like this that work, it kind of makes you want to do more of that because you see the tangible benefit of that. So my question is, where's the line? I know it's a very difficult question, I guess, but you have to strike that balance between where you can make these changes and where you kind of take into account of these meta factors, like you said as well, where you're born, different kind of qualities that you have, genetics, all the rest of it. So what would you kind of say on that? I know it's not a very precise thing to ask, but
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. At first, I'm not an economist, so I don't have the straight up statistics about how big the factor of luck is. I've seen that a lot of researchers say luck is the biggest factor if you account for everything, even the less obvious. A good example is you have a job interview tomorrow, and all of a sudden your neighbor decides to have a fight with his wife. You sleep bad and you don't get the job. So it's very difficult to make a calculation, and I don't think it is possible. And to find guidance and solace in this fact, because why a lot of people find this scary is because they lose sense of control, because that's the appeal of the makeable success, is that you are in control of it and not somebody else or something else. So I think to really come to terms with this, you have to have religion, because otherwise, if you just if you take a materialistic view, you don't know. And we do know that the world in all senses is not fair, because there's a lot of inequality and such. So I think if you want to take this from a purely metaphysical or purely materialistic way, I couldn't really give you a good answer. To where you have to balance it out, but it's not really a satisfying answer. Because you have to be balanced, and you have to do it rationally also. It's not purely belief. But I think religion in this question is much better answer. Because basically, if you take it really extreme, and this is really hard, it's easy to say, it's easy to get rationally, but it's very hard to actually get it spiritually and emotionally in your heart. But if we just look at this life, it's purely a test for the after. And so you could say that the stuff that you can achieve here doesn't matter if it doesn't benefit you in the afterlife.
Yeah.
And we have been taught that our attention is leading. So if we do our best, honestly doing our best, we will get what we want, inshallah, in the afterlife. If we believe in and do our best. So that's step one. Just realizing, okay, this life doesn't actually materialistically matter, because it doesn't matter with how much you end up. It's matter with how much you develop your virtues and how much effort you put out to. So that's step one. Secondly, is just acknowledging is, okay, I don't have full control, and I only have control on my reaction, but not the output. Because there are many sayings in the famous hadith: if the entire world comes together to bring you some good or bad, and Allah doesn't wills it, it won't happen. And if those kind of hadith, it's obvious that everything that we do, the result and the outcome, is by Allah. So everything that we do get in this life doesn't really matter. Just it's about the afterlife, and everything we do is going to be put on the scale. But all our outcomes are in the hands of Allah. And if we look empirically to what Allah manifests normally, we just have to acknowledge that even when we work very hard, we can still fail. If we do everything right in our power, we can still fail. So basically, and that's a very tough tough thing to swallow. But there comes religion to play, and there is where religion is so important, because if you don't believe in afterlife, this basically means that if you work very hard, you can still end up at the bottom of society without being at fault.
Yeah.
So that's the only answer I can get.
Mm,
You cannot really measure it because it is circumstance, it is luck. So you can work hard, but a good example: if you work very hard, but all of a sudden war breaks out, you lose everything.
yeah. Yeah.
Like the pandemic is a great example.
Yeah.
So many people had thriving businesses, just started like 1 year back, didn't, but the business went really well. They did everything okay, but then
Mm,
something happened that they couldn't expect
mm,
rationally. You lose everything.
yeah.
So,
But then,
uh,
okay, mashallah, that definitely makes sense, and it's a good answer. But what I was going to say in response, not in response to that, but kind of just building up onto that, is that that's inherent within the deen already. So, as in this whole thing that sometimes it's good to remind people of, and that's that, and even remind ourselves of, when you're constantly in that kind of hustle mindset, right? It's good to kind of sit back and say it's all intention anyway. Like, all of this doesn't matter if the intention's not there. And then on top of that, it's all effort. So by effort, I don't mean the results. By effort, I mean you're judged on your effort, right? So then it frees you, it cognitively frees you. It's kind of like a mental release, right? Which is obviously the benefit of that. And like what you're saying, if you don't have that, it's like, how we see this thing on social media about, oh, this person's winning and this person's winning, like, oh, they're confined to that. They're just confined to this world, right? So if someone's ostensibly winning, that's all they've got, so you can understand why that can be kind of like a depressive loop, because it's like you said, you can do everything right by the book and things might not go in your favor. What I was going to say though is, I would think that sometimes, even with certain factors that are outside of your control, it benefits you to think those thoughts. Okay, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud, right? So this is kind of, not all of these ideas are kind of well developed. That's the nature of this kind of conversation. So there's this saying where they say, think those thoughts that will help you towards your goals, right? And there's another one that I heard where it's like, tell yourself big lies. This sounds crazy, right? But it's like, tell yourself lies if it's going to help you. So what that kind of leans towards is, if you've got a goal and you want to get it, keep repeating certain things to yourself in like an affirmation kind of Tony Robbins way. As long as it's helping you deep down, you might not even believe it. You might not even think that it's true. But if it engenders a positive state within you that helps you take action, do it, right? And I feel like even saying something like the pandemic, there's going to be two types of people. Some who are going to be more in that defeated category, but then there's others that are going to switch again, and they're just going to say, how do I get to the next level? And they still have that same growth mindset within the struggles. And then again, it's all just a blessing anyway, because them having that way of thinking is not their own doing. If you think about it deeply, it's like, what thoughts you think, it's not really your doing. It's not like, it is to an extent, but you have to have the underlying framework, the underlying kind of neural connections and synapses and brain matter that you had no control over, right? So ultimately, it's not you. But in the kind of physical and pragmatic and practical sense, there are certain things that you can do. So then what I wanted to say is, what about from an Islamic perspective, if you employ empathy, but at the same time, you have knowledge and awareness of these kind of meta factors that are outside of your control, but at the same time, you put in the effort, but you understand that everything is a blessing from Allah anyway. You being able to put in the effort is a blessing from Allah. You having the growth mindset is a blessing from Allah, and it might go down to your childhood, parental upbringing, different books that you've read, but it's all still a blessing from Allah. So I think that safeguards the empathy aspect. So even if you look at the empathy aspect from the religion, so if you have that thinking, you kind of won't look down upon people because it's not you. But then at the same time, you appreciate the blessing, and one of the ways of appreciating the blessing is to use it in the best of ways. So you take action and do what you can.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And yes, we also see that in research that being optimistic, for example, is in general beneficial for your health and well-being, but also for your career and success that you achieve in life. So yes, being optimistic is good, but we also see that it's often more a character trait than something that is developed. But besides that, is I think is basically the second part of our discussion is okay, like you said, yeah, it is inherently in our religion. And when I have these discussions with people, they most often can follow me because it's rational and it's especially why are you born here and not in Africa? It's a very easy and everybody can understand. But you can't influence your height, so you cannot decide. Okay, if I'm very small, I'm going to be the best NBA player. We all understand that.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and that's the second discussion, is we live currently in an environment, and not only the secular, but also deep in our ummah, we live in an environment that shows off false expectations. Because, like you said, we don't have full control on our worldly success, but we have to, even as Muslims, even when you take all this in, you have to sometimes at some point have to make a decision. Okay, is this all down to bad luck? But we don't have bad Qadr, but Allah has willed this, or did I not put in enough effort, or did I individualistically did stuff wrong? At some point, you have to make the decision and have to balance it out. To do that, um, Allah gave us some kind of logic in this world. Because if there was no correlation causality, that we couldn't make any plans or what doesn't matter. And we also see in our Sharia that the urf, the customs and what's normal in society has its weight in even our law. For example, in marriage, what you have to give to your wife, for example, legally depends on what is the normal standards of living. You cannot take the stuff from the Bedouins and say, okay, I just have to give you one dress and I have to give you a tent and no electricity because I don't read it in the books of 1,000 years ago. The normal standard and the normal customs and what's normal in our time plays a role even in our revelation legal juristics. But the problem is that due to current society being so focused on amicable success, because a big part of our economy and our whole way of life and all the branches and businesses are aimed towards you believing that, there's active propaganda basically trying to let you believe that you are fully in control. And social media is a perfect example of it, because we just talked a bit about the roles of algorithms in pushing certain content. If you just put in hashtag fitness on Instagram, you only get the 0.0001% of the population, the best ones. You only get to see the best genetics, the often used performance enhancing drugs, filters. You only get to see the stuff that's really good. So my teacher once gave me a very good example. He said, like, okay, how many people do you know? Maybe 1,000, and that's a lot, So especially if you live in a village, you maybe know a few hundred people. So if you look at the chances, for example, to become a millionaire before you're 30 years old, those chances are so small, and the chance of you personally knowing somebody without the internet, without mass media, we're even talking without papers and stuff, because there's also mass media. The chances of you knowing somebody was very slim. So if, for example, all of a sudden you saw somebody who went from a simple farmer to a king, you knew that it wasn't normal. It's an exception. But now with first newspapers, then radio, then television, now social media, and with all the algorithms, people are not interested in normal stuff. We want to see the extraordinary. If there's an expectation in 1,000, you can easily fill up a TV program for years with all the exceptions. So now when I tell people, okay, it's not normal for you to become a millionaire, they say, okay, but I can show you like 1,000 people in the Netherlands, in my city, who did it. So how can you tell me that all these people I could have possibly know because they live in the same city and now they went from broke to rich? There's an example, because we cannot. It's very hard to understand it, because a good example is me. When I used to be a professional, not a professional. I was a competitive bodybuilder before I was Muslim, but I didn't start off liking bodybuilding. I wanted to go to the army, so I had to get a bit stronger because I was very skinny. So I searched up some information, ended up on a bodybuilding website, and the first time when I saw the professional bodybuilders of now, I thought, oh, there's really even Arnold Schwarzenegger. I didn't really like his look. It was too big. I really disliked it. But all the information on fitness was on those bodybuilding websites. So time after time, I've been exposed. And then I started to find it normal. And after that, I even became to find it, I really found it to be extraordinary. And I really started loving the whole sport of modern day bodybuilding. So the big juiced up guys. And if you're just constantly being bombarded with exceptions just all day long, it's very hard to cognitively and emotionally understand that these are all exceptions, because you don't see otherwise.
Yeah.
So I've when I was a bodybuilder, I was like the biggest guy at the gym, but I was always not happy because I always saw on the internet a lot of guys who looked the same as me, who was 10 times better than me.
Yeah.
But even if I just put off internet and looked at my gym, I was like second largest.
Yeah. Okay. Marshall, that's a very good point, because it's something that I've been thinking about, or I have spoken about before, not on kind of YouTube or anything, but sometimes speak about it to other people. And that's, again, it's the awareness. What we see, the increase in mental issues and comparison, and especially with adolescents and young females comparing themselves to others and things like that, which you can understand it's a pandemic. Because, you know, even when you get into the rabbit hole of getting on Instagram, me personally, right, I have this little mantra that I've been saying. Maybe I'm revealing too much of my self-development kind of hacks, right, by using words like mantras and stuff. But basically, by mantra, in case anyone goes mad and starts refuting, by mantra, I just mean like a reminder, essentially, that you're saying to yourself. One that I've started recently, since I've amped up my social media and YouTube and whatnot, is post and run, right? I say this to myself because I know a few other content creators, Ryan Holiday and stuff like, and people like him. They have this philosophy of like post and chip, as in like don't stay on the platform, which sounds kind of a bit disingenuous, that you're on this platform but then you're not even using it, but you're letting other people use it. So it's a kind of a balance, but you have to, I know myself that if I spend more time on these platforms, now TikTok is the worst, right? But even Instagram, the explore page on Instagram, is the best thing to do is to just post and leg it. And then if I spend more time on it, you'll find that we spoke about this in the last podcast, your metrics start shifting, your comparison group, your mental diet, everything gets negatively affected. And it's like a experiment you can do on yourself. Are you happier, more content when you do that, or where you spend time on it? And I know for certain what's better for me. So that's the kind of philosophy or approach that I'm trying to adapt. But it's and like with anything, it can become a habit, as in it can become a habit for you to not spend time on there, just like it can become a habit for you to spend time on there. But the point about this false notion of success, or the magnification of exceptional cases, let's say, is interesting, because I've heard people say how before we had groups of people that we knew of, about 150 people, let's say village life and small towns, whatnot. And what would happen is everyone had their own identity to an extent. So similar to how you were saying that you were the biggest guy in the gym, in your circle, let's take the internet out of it. You were the guy in terms of like the big guy, the fit guy, the one that we're going to ask about fitness and diet and stuff, right? You would have had that identity that kind of makes people feel good about themselves. They feel respected and they feel as if they've got a role to play within that community. Now, within a small group of like 150 people, and anyone who's been to a third world country or has got family in a third world country, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, they would have seen this. Now everything's been corrupted to an extent because of internet and whatnot. But you could have experienced this about 10, 15 years ago in, say, Pakistan or a different country like this, where it's a close-knit community and everyone's got their role. So you had the good Qur'an reciter, you had the Islamic kid, you had the good looking kid, right? You had the one who's the best at cricket. And then you've got the professionals, and at all kind of levels, everyone has their place. But now what happens is, I try say you've got a kid that you're trying to encourage, and or parents are trying to encourage, and he's reciting the Quran or reciting nasheeds or something, right? And you're like, mashallah, he's really good and you should get more into this and you're really smart or something like this. All he has to do now, so he develops the semblance of this identity. All he has to do now, and he probably won't even have to do it because he'll get sent it, is go online and he'll see these 6-7 year olds like phenoms, right? That
Yeah.
are like imitating the best qaris in the world. So essentially, and that's with any topic, take any sport, if he's into boxing, anything else, he's going to immediately see the exceptional cases, and they're too young to understand this whole kind of long talk about 150 people and how it's not realistic unless the parents or someone tries to help them understand. Even then it might not have an impact. So that's definitely something to think about, because you have to understand. I think a way around it is to see if you can benefit people within your surrounding, right? Limit to the grassroots. Because even with something like this project on a more personal level, right? Before I started it, I used to find these exceptional cases. So this was about 3 years ago. And I used to think, why am I going to do this? As in, this whole project, like, there's people who are better than me in every domain, right? In every domain that I'm in, there's going to be someone who's better. And then there's exceptional cases that they're Muslim as well, and they're probably better than you in every domain. So then I'm thinking, I'm not the right guy to do this project, right? Because for those reasons. But then you have to also think, what benefit is there? Can you give a benefit that these other people aren't giving, because they might not have the same interest in propagating or presenting or things like this. So what I'm trying to say is, I think it's a difficult one, even if you're trying to rectify your intention, that everyone can be susceptible to and go through. Well, how would you address that in terms of, I suppose the main thing is to post and run, or just kind of
Yeah.
limit it, or just have that awareness helps as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice everyone to have some practical tools. I'll challenge everybody who's listening to this. Think by yourself. Okay, what am I passionate about? What are my hobbies? And look at, okay, what am I following? For example, I like working out a lot, and I still, even when I don't compete anymore because of Islamic reasons, I still love strength training and all kinds of training stuff. So I'll challenge everybody just for 1 month. For example, you like fitness, unfollow every big fitness influencer that you follow that looks better than you. Just unfollow just for a month. And after that, you can follow twice as much if you want. Just do it for 1 month. Or if you like fashion, remove all the pretty people.
Yeah.
If you like Quran, remove all those children or 5 years old who are like perfect machines. Just do that for 1 month and look how it changes your mental health, basically, and how it changes your perception. And basically, then all of a sudden, you reach reality. So, like you said, it is very difficult. Why? Because um, the world has been actively set up for us to believe this. And you gave an very good argument. If you just, like, first you said, okay, it is in our religion, which is true. And this stuff, if you tell to people, they believe it. But the simple reason people don't really actually believe it if we look at the mental health numbers. Indeed, with growing materialism, growing anxiety, growing depressions, burnout numbers that are sky high and never seen before in those young age groups that we're in right now. So if we again look empirically, we see that a very big part of society, the biggest part of society, might understand it if you tell to them, but they didn't internalize it. So how do you internalize this? Well, first of all, to actually internalize it in a well put way, because I could not answer this question from a pure materialistic statistical way. You cannot answer this question. It's a spiritual question, because if you don't understand how Allah works, how our deen works, and what it means for your worldly life, not only for your akhirah, only then can you accurately put this stuff together. So, subhanAllah, I remember when I first became Muslim, there was in the full Salafi versus Sufi days, and because there was so much discussion about basically stuff that doesn't impact me. For example, the ayat about Allah's hand. Okay, it's important to understand them well, but if I take them literally, metaphorically, or all those positions that we have, it doesn't actually change my practical religion. But knowing how Qadr works, knowing what rizq is and how it works, this is really practical and has a practical application. But I think it's also important that we as youth have to give this message to our often more elderly shuyukh. Because what I've noticed that many shuyukh don't see this problem very much. They don't really see the problem because they're often not exposed to social media as much, and they're basically there's an age gap. I'm 20, I'm almost 28 and 27 right now. I'm turning 28 in May, and when I see all the TikTok kids, I'm already feeling like I'm 50 years old because I really didn't understand them. So how can we expect somebody who is like 40, 50, 60-year-olds to understand what we've been up to when they've been in an entire different world when they grew up? So I think it's very important that we start articulating the problems we have with this problem, that we have too high expectations, as we feel anxious and depressed about our worldly progress. We have to accurately communicate our worries and thoughts to our shuyukh so they can give accurate answers to this. And thirdly is actively looking up these kinds of information. For example, if you just write meritocracy, there are a few books on it that are very good. I know of a very good article by Ibn Abi Omar. He also has a podcast. Sorry for promoting another one, but
no, why do you have to? Why do you have to apologize? We're all about. I like to view myself as a curator, less so a producer, right? More so like gathering different sources together and stuff. And just a little plug, I'm trying to start a email newsletter where I'm going to make it like the Tim Ferriss style of like one thing I found interesting this week and just direct people to different sources. But anyway, just send me the link afterwards and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, I will, because he is one of the few, not that he is the only one, but I have actively searched for this, and he was one of the first guys that I saw that really accurately made a Islamic rundown of this topic. So he has some good posts on his website. But if you just Google the factor of luck in success, there are so many scientific papers on this, and also, of course, not only scientific papers are a bit dry to read, but there are a lot of articles on this, and just making it a habit to reflect on this spiritually, but also empirically.
Yeah,
I think that is the biggest part. So like you said, it's very true. I keep my follow lists very, very short, and I only follow people that I find interesting. But sometimes there are even people that I unfollow because they suck me in, or I've noticed in myself, and it's not like envy or evil eye or hatred, but just I get so enthusiastic by some seeing somebody doing something so well, but if I'm being honest, like it's not possible for me to do the same because
Mm.
of my genetics, my time, my position in life. I just unfollow them because I notice that I get a want, a nefsani drive for something that's not realistic. So be very cautious with your intake of information,
Mm.
and reflect on it spiritually and empirically, because yeah, it really takes some good understanding of Akida. And I always, you have to have a teacher for this, I think, if you really have to get it down. And secondly, um, just cognitively with our akal, having the empirical evidence as well, sometimes because we are weak in faith, often helps a lot to see proof from secular sources even saying the same.
Mm.
So I think that's those are the important
Mm.
parts.
Jazakallah khair. I like that you tailored it back to the practical, which is what, alhamdulillah, I like to focus on here as well. But obviously, it's good to sometimes have a deeper discussion that I think people resonate with. It's more going to be a trickle down effect because, like you said, it's going to be very hard to get this thinking to the TikTok generation, right?
Yeah.
Even though I've started posting on there, I don't include myself in that generation. But I suppose if the parents have that understanding, it might lead to a different kind of approach when it comes to teaching about these topics or talking about these topics, such as social media and its uses. Um, One thing I will say though is that I think if you do have that, also if you have the sense that the whole effect of the 150 people versus identity and all the rest of it, um, also that you're only seeing you're not privy to the behind the scenes of these people, right? And I think a good test that we can use is just in our own lives. You know how you said that, how many people do you know that are like this, right? Just within your own friend circle, you know the behind the scenes of people, and then you know what they might post on social media. It's very difficult to be 100% kind of authentic, right? There's very few people like that. Um, so everyone knows. I think that keeps people empathetic because, and it safeguards you from envy as well. Because look, someone might have good aspects, then alhamdulillah, you have good aspects as well. I think maybe some people, they can't think like that, and again, that's deep issues. They might have different struggles that they've been dealing with, low self-esteem and stuff. But for me, if you see someone doing good, one, if you have a growth mindset, you might think that that is achievable. If you don't think it's achievable, there's reasons for that. Time, your interest, your own curiosity, how you practice the faith. It doesn't mean that you're not envying them in a negative sense, because you know that's not something that you're going to do, and it's just kind of fine, and everyone has their own blessings. And you see something from that perspective, it kind of safeguards you from feeling those kind of negative emotions, I guess. But yeah, so I think I had a list of those topics that we had, and I think we've kind of spoken about everything. It's been, I think, about 1 hour, 1 hour 10, 1 hour 15 minutes. So Alhamdulillah, that was a very good and very quite a deep discussion. Um, so if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about in closing, I will obviously direct people to your, ironically, your social media
Inshallah.
and your website as well, muslimfit.com. And they can contact you if they want to kind of get official or more structured coaching or just discuss these ideas. And I think we've both come across a bit serious on this, like in real life. I know you're quite jokey and whatnot. I can rely on you to put me in place if I ever post something slightly dodgy. So that's also appreciated. But if there's anything else that you want to say, Akhi, otherwise we'll close the.
Yeah. To close off, I think there two two things are very important. To sum it up, at first, if you really want to know if you're doing well in life or not, you have to investigate this subject, because you cannot grade your effort and your work if you don't have the reality of what you can expect and what not. What is really good? What is really realistic to realize? And unfortunately, our environment, even our schools, are not teaching us the reality of stuff. So you have to go and investigate this and put in effort. And secondly, okay, after realizing that you might have high standards that are too high and not realistic, and that a huge part of your success just comes down to pure luck, Qadr, what should that do with you? It should create that empathy. So realizing that if chance plays a big role, have empathy for if somebody fails or is on a lower status than you, and don't think they're losers or what else. And even more importantly, having self-empathy, because quite often we can find these excuses for others if we see somebody fail, but we're often very harsh towards ourselves. So you need this knowledge to be able to first make sure you're not self-pitying, so thinking that you don't do the work necessary because you have to put in effort. That's what Allah has required from us. But secondly, you also need this information to basically be effective, because if you blame yourself for stuff that's out of your control, you're self-harming and you're not finding solutions. So you need self-compassion to progress. So acknowledging that you can fail is actually being an optimized Muslim.
Perfect ending. I have to say, perfect ending. You know, whilst you're talking, I get different questions and ideas I want to discuss, but you know, that's going to be the third installment, inshallah. So yeah, Jazakallah khairan. Appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.